So welcome. This is the February 2nd, 2022, 2/2/2022 Prince William County LHRC meeting. And I will turn it over to the chair and you can start the meeting.
Okay, this is Susan Evers. I'm calling the meeting to order at 4:34 p.m.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to do a roll call for attendance just to document your name. And so when I call your name, say here. Susan Evers?
Here.
Sally Starr?
Here.
Alice Felker? It's going to take me a while, Alice.
Here. No, that was great.
Thank you. James Pritchard?
Here.
Thank you. Francesca Bellamont?
Here.
Belmonte? Wait, I said that wrong.
Belmonte.
Belmonte, thank you. It's cut off on my screen and I forgot.
No worries.
Thank you all. All right, so next on the agenda, Susan, is the approval of the agenda.
Okay, you have a motion to approve the agenda.
A motion to approve the agenda.
Thanks, Sally. Can I have a second?
Seconded motion.
Thanks, James. And I'm going to roll call your name. Just say yes, you approve that motion. Susan?
Yes.
Sally?
Yes.
Alice?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Francesca?
Yes.
Very good. Everyone except for Alice would have gotten a copy of the minutes, so we're on that one. If you want me to put the minutes up, let me know. Be happy to put that up from that last meeting. But we're on review and approval of the minutes, Susan.
Okay. Does anybody have any input or changes to the minutes?
Did I spell anybody's name wrong? I do that sometimes by mistake.
Okay, if there's no additions or changes, a motion to approve the minutes from the prior meeting.
I second the motion.
I need a first motion. So you're the motion, James, so I need a second.
I'll second. Oh,
Thanks,
Sorry,
Francesca.
Francesca.
no worries.
So do you approve the motion, Susan?
Yes.
Sally?
Yes.
Alice?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Francesca?
Yes.
Very good. So we're on public comment. I do not see anyone in the waiting room wishing to make a public comment. I did not receive any emails or correspondence from anyone wishing to make public comment. As you are aware, you guys as members of this committee, you're also welcome to make public comments. And if not, then we can leave it open until 4:45. I have other items that I can discuss in the event that someone tries to come into the room wishing to make a public comment. But certainly you guys get first crack at it. Is there anyone from the committee who wishes to make public comment?
I decline.
I decline.
Perfect. So as we were talking that we are in a state of emergency, the prior governor declared a state of emergency based on weather events. And because of that, the commissioner and the governor worked together to allow for virtual meetings. And it's a Freedom of Information Act issue that really keeps us from having 100% virtual meetings because there has to be a physical quorum in one location for people to attend. Obviously, there's all sorts of debates about whether virtual offers more or less participation. Regardless, we have to follow those FOIA laws. So while there's a state of emergency, there was that flexibility in allowing for our meetings to be 100% virtual. Certainly with the Omicron and other variants that are existing in the world, that may change, but the governor's, the state of emergency order is going to expire next Wednesday. So any LHRC meetings held after that date will go back to in-person meetings. So we would, at our April meeting, we would have our meeting at the Phoenix Drive location. And Alice, did I send you a copy of that location? It's a map, but it kind of shows what the building looks like.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. I remembered one thing. So we would resume that. And of course, if we cannot have an in-person quorum to conduct the provider required business, then we would be flexible as we have been in the past and try and come up with an alternative. We would prefer in person. And I think all of you were in agreement that you'd be able to facilitate that.
Mhm.
We discussed that as long as there is a physical quorum in place, that there's 5 of you. If there are 4 of you that were willing, well, I'm sorry, I take that back, 3, right? Willing to be in person, the other 2 could participate virtually and you'd be able to rotate that. So as long as there's a quorum physically present, other members can participate virtually. So that certainly something we can have discussions about as we get closer to that April date. And of course, depending on the state of the pandemic and the state of the world, that's certainly something to consider. But for all intents and purposes, the plan for the next meeting is for it to be in person at the Phoenix Drive location. So just a little commentary on the meeting and the materials for the meeting. So Amaya Henderson is our new administrative support. And I was waiting to confirm everyone's address. So all the LHRCs in the region have confirmed all of your contact information. Amaya has that. So if she hasn't already, she will be sending you a confidentiality statement, and there's instructions on how to send it back, what to do with it. That's through Amaya. She's handling that, but that will be coming to you. But in the future, prior to a meeting, maybe a week before the meeting, she will send you a copy of the current agenda and copies of the LHRC review forms. Now for today, I will pull them up on the screen so that you can see them, but at future meetings, you will get all of those prior to the meeting. What I will then do prior to the meeting is send you an updated agenda, because those things are likely to change during the week, and then send any additional information and forms that you guys have requested. I'll send that along as well. A little bit of background, we were talking a minute ago, just conversationally, so I'll bring it into the official part of the meeting, that when a provider knows that they have restraints that are in a behavior plan, because remember, restraints can only be done if they're prescribed and identified in a behavior plan, or there are restrictions. There's 2 places where the regulations talk about restrictions, section 50, which are assured rights, and those are very specific things like being called your preferred name, attending church services. They're very specific rights. And then there's section 100, which are restrictions to freedoms of everyday activity. Those are a little more nebulous. Those are things like freedom to move around the service setting, have access to your money, have access to your personal possessions. They're a little bit less specific. Any of those restrictions that are imposed on an individual that lasts longer than 7 days, or is imposed 3 or more times in a 30-day period, that requires LHRC review. So you have behavior plans with restraints or timeout, and you have restrictions. Now, some behavior plans can have restrictions in them, so everything's done at the same time, but sometimes there's just restrictions. Restrictions are identified in one of 2 places, either the behavior plan or in the ISP. They have to be identified somewhere, and we look at those. So when providers contact me and say, hey, I have this behavior plan, we have a restraint in it, then I look at the agendas of all of the LHRCs to figure out which one's the most appropriate, whether it's a short-term review, and then long-term, one of the LHRCs are going to look at it, which is where you guys are kind of at right now. Prince William County has long-term plans that they review on a regular basis for people that live in and around Prince William County. You may have some other things that come up, but in general, those are the types of plans that you have. So providers submit to me the LHRC review forms. If it's a behavior plan with restraint or restrictions, they have to submit the behavior plan. If it's just restrictions, they have to submit that portion of the ISP, typically part 5, and the sections highlighted that relate to the restriction. My job is to go through those forms and make sure that it indicates on the form is what is indicated on the behavior plan and in the ISP. Now, it's not always the case, surprisingly enough, and it's a good thing I don't always take people at face value, but I do check. I do look through the behavior plan very, very thoroughly to make sure that everything they have on that form is accurate. Sometimes I find that there's things in the plan that they didn't have on the form, that correction is provided to them. And, it's same thing with the restrictions, that as much as I can review, I go through so that when you get that LHRC review form, you can trust that I have looked at it, looked at the behavior plan, looked at the ISP. In general, the LHRCs don't look at those because that would be a big rabbit hole that you would jump right down. Behavior plans are around 30 pages. ISPs can be that long as well. So that's not really good use of our time. The LHRC review form is supposed to be that summary document that helps do that. You guys will see, or else you'll see, and you guys know that in our region, we do utilize an information summary sheet. That's so we can keep track of who everybody is, because we have a lot of plans, and that way it helps us remember what we're looking at. So our region does utilize those, and those are shared with you guys for your request. So the long story short of that conversation is that when you get to this point, when the people come to the meeting, your focus isn't on, is this form accurate, unless I've highlighted it as potential question. It's asking the questions about restraints and restrictions. What are the lesser restrictive alternatives tried? Is there fading criteria? Our consent sign, has the independent review committee looked at this? So there's other things that you guys ask questions of. I already have looked at all the other parts. In addition, for clinical efficacy, if there's a behavior plan that uses restraints or timeout, the independent review committee has already looked at those and determined the clinical efficacy of that plan. And that review is every 3 months as well. So that's a routine review. There you go, long-winded answer. So we are right around the time for public comment. And again, no one has entered in the room. Certainly if someone does, we'll allow them in to make their public comment. So I will go back to the agenda, and Madam Chair, it indicates chair announcements. Do you have any chair announcements? It's okay if you don't, by the way. Oh, did we lose her? No, you have to hit *6, I believe, Susan, to unmute yourself on your phone if you're there. I don't think I can say ask unmute. There you go.
I'm sorry. I have no comments other than, or announcements other than I won't be able to read if they're going into close because I can't get it on the screen.
Very good. I can have someone else do that for you. Thank you for letting me know.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. So under advocate report, we've added some new sections to the advocate report because really there's a lot to provide to you guys information wise, and this just helps us have that information. So I mentioned some of the changes are going to be happening, that it will be Amaya who will contact you to make sure there's a physical quorum for the meeting. And if there's not, then she'll let me know and we'll make our best effort to ensure the business of the LHRC and the providers gets conducted. So we talked about that and receiving the forms. So one thing, let's see if I can share it. One thing that I want to share with you is what we are wanting to share in general with you guys. This is just a snapshot of the region and in terms of all the reports. So remember that individuals and providers and family can make 2 types of reports to the Office of Human Rights. One is a human rights complaint. Hey, the staff person, James, keeps calling me Annie. My name is Ann. He's violating my human rights. It's very clear human rights complaint. That's what we call them, human rights complaints. Staff person, James, he slapped me last night. That's a complaint with an allegation of abuse, neglect, exploitation. So we differentiate those as complaint reports and A&E, abuse, neglect, exploitation reports. And we typically divide them up into a few categories. One is all IDDD providers, intellectual disability, developmental disability providers, and then essentially everybody else, which is substance abuse and mental health. State facility providers are their own category and they have their own set of reports and they look at them all as a group collectively, whereas the community separates out IDDD. So we look at them, there's different ways to enter reports. There's providers and there's CSBs, and this is just some of the numbers. So for the last quarter of 2021, the providers entered 113 abuse, neglect, exploitation reports. There were 147 substance abuse, mental health, and that includes adolescent mental health programs. That sort of accounts for why it's so large. There were only 2 IDDD complaints, human rights complaints, and 14 substance abuse, mental health, adolescent programs. The CSB entered 8 and 8 for a total of 16, and no complaints and 5 complaints. So the total for the region for the last quarter was 276 abuse, neglect, exploitation reports and 21 complaints. Now we touch all of those. We look at every single one of those reports. I read every single one because then I assign it to one of the other staff in the region. And then those staff read every single one that's assigned to them and they review the findings for every single one of those reports. So of those total reports, 38 were substantiated by the provider. Now you guys remember that one of our functions as the LHRC is that individuals and their guardians have a right to disagree with the findings of the provider. If the provider unsubstantiated something, the individual or the family can contact Human Rights, and it's on the decision letter, and say, hey, I don't agree with that finding, unsubstantiated, what are you talking about? There were 3 witnesses that saw James slap Ann. I saw it, I was there, I heard about it. And they have a right to request a hearing before a local human rights committee. We had just had a hearing the other day. The Northern Virginia Hospital, LHRC, conducted the hearing. They're a long process. They're a thorough process, but I would say it's also a very interesting process. And I think some of you have been through it, can certainly comment on that. Very worthwhile, and really does speak to the commitment on LHRC members' parts, and of course for due process to the individuals receiving services. So remember that individuals and families can disagree with the findings of the provider. So can the advocates, myself and the other advocates in the region. And remember, we look at all the reports, we look at the findings. The provider can say unsubstantiated, but we can disagree, and we can offer citation recommendations as well, even if they didn't substantiate. If a provider substantiates a report, it's an automatic citation because they admitted that there was abuse, neglect, exploitation, or human rights complaint. That's an automatic citation. But if we disagree with their findings, we can issue that as well. And this is someone coming in, so they're early, which I appreciate. So this is just a snapshot of our region. Any questions on that data? If not, I'm going to go back to the agenda. So right now in the region, under regional data summary of current variances, we only have 1 variance. Variances are unusual, and this is our very first one. So a variance is that a provider says, hey, I can't do this one thing in the regulations. I just can't. I tried, but it's just not functional. It's just not practical. And so they request a variance of the regulations. It takes a couple of months, the process to go through to do that. The first step is that they have to contact their board of directors and have them all agree that this variance is necessary. So the board of directors or the governing body of that provider has to make that determination to request that variance. You have to come before the LHRC and fill out all the forms indicating why that variance is necessary. You also have to offer up what you're going to do instead of that regulation. If you're saying you can't do this, well, what are you going to do instead of that? That's part of the process. The LHRC starts the review process. It goes to the State Human Rights Committee. The State Human Rights Committee looks it over. It gets published in the state register. There's X amount of time for that to sit there in case there's public comment, and then the SHRC reviews it again. So at present, we have 1. We have a new commissioner, Commissioner Smith. Oh my gosh, I'm not even sure his new name. That's terrible. And so if we do get some weekly reports that I think would be advantageous to you guys, I'll share. Right now, I'm sharing emails and articles that are sent by Lauren C. So if you guys, especially Alice, if you've gotten a stray email from me and it's just all these article links, that's what it is. I don't send them all to you because she sends a lot. So if there's a series that look interesting or relevant to you guys, then I forward them on. If you ever don't want them, let me know. Happy to remove you from that list. So upcoming events and trainings. So I will share later with you guys. I'll make a point of doing that, where the training information is on our website. Oh, good. Let me do a quick message real quick. Message on the way around.
Unknown caller.
No, I got it's APTS and it's VOA. They're the first ones on our agenda. I told them to come in early, so that's good. I like it when people listen. So I'll send you guys the links and information on those statewide trainings. As I was saying a little bit ago to Alice, that we have live virtual trainings through Zoom that you can attend and you can get a certificate for, but there's also a YouTube channel. Now I'm told that while it is on the DBHES's YouTube channel, you can't search for it and find it. So you have to go to the right link to come to that library that has those 4 recorded trainings, and anybody can watch them. They're public record. So certainly that's something that you guys can watch. I would recommend the restrictions behavior plan restraints training because that's the one that most relates to you guys. But when they do have the human rights regulations and overview, that's a good one for you guys as well. And that next one is in March 17th. That's a nice review for you guys as well to really understand human rights regulations. So feel free to watch or attend either one of those. Very good. I have no old business, Susan. Do you have any old business?
No old business.
Perfect. Then I'm going to pull up the closed session. I'm going to ask someone to read it. We will second and then take a roll call vote, and then we'll pause the recording and I will bring the individuals into the room. So if there's someone who can see that wants to read us into closed session and make that motion, I would appreciate it.
I'd be happy to do that.
Thanks, James.
Whereas the Prince William County Local Human Rights Committee desires to discuss in closed session client-related matters, and whereas pursuant to Virginia Code 2.1-344A, paragraph 1.5, for the protection of the privacy of individuals and their records in personal matters not related to public business, such discussions may occur in closed session. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Prince William County Local Human Rights Committee does hereby authorize discussions of the aforementioned matters in closed session.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
I second that.
Who did that? Was that
Sally.
Sally? Thanks, Sally. Susan, are you in agreement with that motion?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Perfect. Sally, are you in agreement with that motion?
Yes.
Alice?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Francesca?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you all. I'm going to hit pause. Thank you. Go ahead, James.
Whereas the Prince William County Local Human Rights Committee has this day adjourned into closed session in accordance with the formal vote of the committee and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas the Freedom of Information Act requires certification that each such closed session was conducted in conformity with the law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Prince William County Local Human Rights Committee does hereby certify that to the best of their knowledge, only matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such matters for the protection of the privacy of individuals and their records in personal matters not related to public business were heard, discussed, or considered.
Very good. If I can have a second to that.
I second that.
Thanks, Sally. And I'm going to roll call. When I call your name, you say, I so certify. Susan?
I so certify.
Thank you, Sally.
I so certify.
Alice?
I so certify.
James?
I so certify.
Francesca?
I so certify.
Perfect. Thank you. So the last time on our agenda is to review and approve all the items that we discussed in closed session. So I'm going to tell you what the recommendations were, and then one of you all can make a motion second. And again, I'll roll call it to make sure that we're all in agreement. Don't pay attention to your phone during a meeting. Okay, so individual number one, the recommendation was for the individual to return on 8/3. Individual number two, the recommendation was to return on 6/1. Individual number three, did I get that wrong? Individual number three is to return on 4/6. Individual number four is to return on 6/1. Individual number five is to return on 6/1. Individual number six is to return on 8/3. Individual number seven is to return on 6/1. Individual number eight to return on 6/1. Individual number nine to return on 6/1. So if I can have a motion that those be the approved recommendations.
I make a
I
motion.
make a motion to approve those.
Thanks, James. I'm going to take James. Susan, you want a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And roll call, Susan? You approve the recommendation?
yeah.
You approve that
I approve.
motion? Yep. Sally, you approve that motion?
Yes.
Alice?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Francesca?
Yes.
Any questions from you guys?
No.
So then Susan, you can comment that having completed all the identified business on the agenda, you can call the meeting adjourned at the time you identify.
We have concluded all the items on the agenda, so we can adjourn this meeting at 6:38.
Excellent. I'm going to stop recording.